tick, tock. The Clockmaker of Boston. Chapter 1. The Letter from the President. Boston, January 1863. The city slept beneath a blanket of snow, its harbor frozen like glass. The war had drained color from every street. Even the gas lamps seemed dimmer that winter. Newspapers fluttered through the alleys. Battle of Fredericksburg lost. Union struggles continue. Each headline a reminder that America itself hung by a thread. Inside a cramped workshop on Tremont Street, Elias Finch leaned over his workbench, his fingers trembling with exhaustion and excitement. All around him ticked the sounds of hundreds of clocks, a symphony of time. Wooden gears, brass cogs, and tiny hammers surrounded him like instruments of destiny. But in the center of the table lay something no one else had ever built. A circular frame of copper lined with glass tubing and silver wire, pulsing faintly with blue light. He called it the chronometer. It wasn't designed to tell time. It was designed to remember it. For months, Elias had worked in secret, inspired by strange drawings smuggled from a dying soldier who claimed he'd seen machines of light in a dream of the future. Finch had dismissed it as madness until the blueprints began to work. Each night, the device stored faint images in its mirrored core, as if recording slices of time itself. He didn't yet know what he had built, only that it could change everything. At precisely 2:13 a.m., the front bell jingled. No one should have been there. Elias froze. His apprentice, young Caleb, had gone home hours ago. A tall man in a dark overcoat stepped inside. His boots left melting snow across the floorboards. He carried a leather satchel stamped with the Union Eagle. "Mr. Finch?" The man's voice was calm, precise, too precise for an ordinary messenger. Elias hesitated. "Who's asking?" The stranger removed a sealed envelope and placed it on the table. The wax bore the mark of the White House, the Great Seal of the United States, pressed deep and flawless. "By order of the President," the messenger said quietly, "you are to read this in private. Burn it after." Then he turned and left, his footsteps vanishing into the blizzard. Elias's hands shook as he broke the seal. The parchment inside was crisp, formal, and terrifyingly direct. "Mr. Finch, it has come to my attention that you possess a device of uncommon design. One..." Elias sat back, the letter trembling in his hand. How could Lincoln possibly know about the device? He told no one, not even Caleb, about the chronometer's true purpose. He turned toward the window. The harbor beyond shimmered faintly in moonlight, the frozen masts of ships standing like tombstones. Somewhere out there, men were dying to preserve a nation. And yet here, in this quiet workshop, he held something that might rewrite the world. For hours, he paced, unable to sleep. The clocks around him ticked louder, like the heartbeat of history itself. By dawn, he'd made his decision. He would meet the president's man, but he would not hand over the device. Not yet. The arrival. 3 days later, the representative arrived. Colonel Nathaniel Briggs, a Union intelligence officer rumored to have once served as a spy in London. He was tall, severe, his blue uniform sharp as glass. His eyes moved like a hawk's, quick, cold, always calculating. Elias greeted him politely, but his gut told him one thing. This man wasn't here just to negotiate. Briggs wasted no time. "I'll be brief, Mr. Finch. The president believes your invention can help the Union. If it can record what has happened, even for seconds, imagine its value. We could know enemy movements before they reach us. Witness spies without their knowing." He frowned. "It doesn't show the future, Colonel. It only remembers the past, captures what's already happened." "Then perhaps you simply haven't built it completely yet." Elias felt his heart quicken. How did he know? Briggs slid a folder across the table. Inside were sketches, military blueprints. But these were his sketches, the ones he'd burned months ago to keep his secret safe. "Where did you get these?" Elias whispered. "The same place we got your name," Briggs said coolly. "Mr. Finch, the government already knows more about your work than you imagine. You will deliver the chronometer to Washington in 3 days, or we'll come back for it." He tipped his hat and left. That night, Elias locked the doors, barred the windows, and buried the device beneath the floorboards. Then he did something he'd never done before. He went to the tavern across the street and drank until the clocks in his mind went silent. Caleb found him the next morning, pale and trembling. "Sir, what happened?" "Nothing," Elias lied. "Just time catching up to me." But deep inside, he knew something was changing, not just in his workshop, but in the world itself. Somehow his creation had slipped beyond his control. And somewhere in Washington, President Lincoln waited for a device that could bend memory, perhaps even history, to his will. End of chapter 1. The visit in the fog. 2 weeks passed without word from Colonel Briggs. Elias hoped the threat had passed, that the colonel had been reassigned or perhaps killed at the front. But as winter thickened, so did his fear. On the night of February 9th, a heavy fog rolled in from the harbor. The sound of foghorns echoed like the mournful cries of lost ships. Elias worked late, oil lamp flickering as he tested the chronometer's circuits again. Tiny tubes of mercury glowing faint blue with every pulse. He heard the sound then. Footsteps on the stairs outside his workshop. Not one pair, 3. He reached for his wrench. Not a weapon, but the only one within reach. The door creaked open. A man in a black overcoat stepped inside. Not Colonel Briggs. Someone colder, thinner, eyes hidden behind circular spectacles that reflected the lamplight like 2 mirrors. Behind him came 2 soldiers, unmarked uniforms, rifles slung low. No insignia, no identity. The man spoke quietly. "Elias Finch, you've been selected for immediate service to the Union under Executive Order 906. Elias frowned. "I serve in no military capacity." The man smiled thinly. "You do now." He removed a leather document from his coat and placed it on the table. The seal wasn't the official White House crest. It was something else. A stylized eye inside a gear, encircled by Latin words. Tempus custos.
the keepers of time. Elias felt his stomach twist. What is this? The man's voice lowered. A division that does not exist, created under direct authority of the War Department. Its purpose is to manage inventions too dangerous for public knowledge. We call it the Shadow Bureau. He tapped the parchment once. And your chronometer, Mr. Finch, now belongs to us.
The Bureau's demand. They gave him no choice. By morning, Elias was escorted out of Boston on a steam carriage bound for Washington, D.C. The soldiers said nothing, their faces hidden by fogged goggles and scarves. They traveled through frozen countryside, avoiding main roads. At every station, Elias saw strange cargo, covered crates guarded by men in plain clothes, marked only with the same gear and eye symbol. When they reached Washington, it was nearly midnight. The capital was alive with flickering torches and the low rumble of industry. Factories pounded steel for the war effort, but Elias was taken not to the government quarter, instead, to a building that didn't exist on any map. It stood on the edge of the Potomac, half buried into the hillside, a complex of iron and glass with chimneys that belched pale smoke into the stars. No sign, no flag. Just a brass plate that read, Department of Scientific Advancement, Restricted Entry. Inside, the air smelled of oil and ozone. Machines hissed in the shadows, some familiar, others impossible to name. And everywhere, the ticking of clocks. The man in the white gloves. At the heart of the facility, Elias met the director, a pale man with sharp eyes and immaculate white gloves. His name was Dr. Alaric Monroe. Mr. Finch, Monroe began, you've built something extraordinary. The president's letter reached us long before you did. You've opened a door we've been knocking on for decades. I didn't open any door. I built a recorder. That's all, Elias said. Monroe smiled. A recorder that remembers light itself, that can capture what happened in a room days, weeks, even months ago, if tuned correctly. Tell me, Mr. Finch, what do you think happens if we push it further? Elias hesitated. You mean to see forward? Not see, Monroe whispered. Shift. He gestured toward a large metal ring in the corner of the lab, an enlarged version of Elias's chronometer, 10 feet wide, connected by dozens of glass tubes. Inside, it shimmered a faint distortion, as though the air itself remembered something the present could not. Elias stepped back. That's not my design. No, Monroe said softly. It's ours. Your blueprints were only the seed. He snapped his fingers. The soldiers rolled in a covered crate and opened it. Inside lay Elias's own chronometer, disassembled, studied, stripped bare. We copied your work the moment Colonel Briggs saw it. Now, with your help, we'll complete it. Imagine, Mr. Finch, ending the war before it begins, reversing mistakes, correcting history. Elias shook his head. You can't control time like it's a battlefield map. It doesn't belong to us. Monroe's smile vanished. Neither does freedom, Mr. Finch. But men die every day to define it. The experiment. For weeks, Elias was forced to work inside the bureau. They gave him a private workshop under constant watch, guards outside his door, and a single assistant, Dr. Clara Vale, a young physicist with fire in her eyes and a secret past of her own. She spoke in whispers when the guards left. They're trying to weaponize your device, she said one night. They believe they can rewind small moments, fix battle outcomes, intercept assassinations before they occur. Elias looked up sharply. Assassinations? Clara hesitated, then whispered, Lincoln. They think someone's already planning it. Elias froze. The president? He'd read rumors, Confederate spies in Washington, plots whispered in taverns, but to change history to stop it? That was madness. They'll destroy reality, he said. Clara nodded. They already have. You just haven't seen it yet. The glimpse. One night, while testing the chronometer's expanded circuit, Elias accidentally tuned the mercury tubes too high. The ring pulsed with blinding light. Clara screamed, and for a moment, the air itself split open. Through it, Elias saw a vision not of the past, but of a future battlefield. Men in gray and blue uniforms lay scattered across open fields, but above them flew machines of metal, screaming through the sky like thunderbirds. Cities of glass towered in the distance, burning. He stepped back trembling. What year was that? Clara stared at the readings. It wasn't any year that exists. Before they could shut it down, the door burst open. Colonel Briggs stood there, his uniform dusted with snow. His face was stone. We've just given you proof, Mr. Finch, proof that history can be changed. Elias shouted, You don't understand what you saw. That's not a victory, that's annihilation. But Briggs only smiled coldly. Every invention is a weapon, Finch. You of all people should know that. End of Chapter 2. Chapter 3. The Experiment That Changed History. The air inside the bureau changed after that night. Something invisible had shifted, not just in the machines, but in the people. The corridors felt colder. The clocks no longer ticked in harmony. They seemed to argue with one another, each out of rhythm, as if time itself had begun to fracture. Elias Finch didn't need a scientist to tell him that they had gone too far. He could feel it, in the static hum of the walls, in the trembling glass, in the faces of men who no longer slept. And yet, the work continued. Dr. Alaric Monroe had become obsessed. He ordered round-the-clock tests, demanding the chronometer's new temporal amplifier be ready within the week. He believed they could use it to rewrite a moment in history, to erase a Confederate victory and replace it with a Union triumph. It was no longer science. It was madness with an army behind it. The briefing. The morning of the experiment, Elias was escorted into a subterranean war room. Maps of the United States covered the walls, riddled with red and blue pins. Lincoln's portrait loomed above the table, watching silently as men debated the fate of the nation. Colonel Briggs stood at the center, his gloved hands on the map. Gentlemen, he began, our intelligence confirms that Confederate General J.E.B. Stuart will lead a cavalry ambush near Brandy Station 3 days from now. It will cost the Union over 1,400 men, a catastrophic loss. He turned to Elias. Unless we correct it. Elias stared at the colonel, speechless. You can't change a battle before it happens. You'll tear a hole in history. Monroe's voice sliced through the air. And if that hole ends a war, Mr. Finch, perhaps it's a wound worth bleeding.
On the table sat a miniature replica of the chronometer, fitted with shimmering crystal tubes glowing faintly blue. It hummed with a low resonance that made the air vibrate. Monroe gestured to it like a priest before an altar. Tonight, we'll send an imprint back, a message encoded in temporal light. It will reach an officer's field watch, one we've modified using your design. He will act differently. The ambush will fail. The Union will win. And if it doesn't? Asked Elias. Monroe smiled thinly. Then time will simply adjust.
The warning. Later that night, Clara Vale slipped into Elias's quarters. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep. She carried a small notebook, pages filled with numbers, frequencies, sketches of the energy waves emitted by the device. "I've done the calculations," she whispered. "If they activate the amplifier at full power, it won't send a message. It'll invert the flow. Time won't just shift backward, it'll fold." Elias frowned. "Fold?" She said, "Imagine history as a sheet of glass. You can't bend it without cracks. The moment they activate the amplifier, everything connected to that timeline could shatter, merge past and present into chaos." Elias stood silent, his heart pounding. "Then we have to stop it." Clara nodded, voice trembling. "I've seen what happens when they test small bursts. People near the machine, they remember things that never happened. One man swore he'd watched his own funeral." She handed him a piece of paper. "These are the override codes, the only way to shut it down once it starts." The experiment. February 27th, 1863. Midnight. The Bureau's main hall was alive with power. Cables hummed, glass tubes glowed with liquid light. Generators screamed like metal beasts. At the center stood the massive chronometric ring, towering 15 feet high, spinning slowly as energy arced across its surface like lightning caught in water. Dozens of officers and scientists gathered on the observation deck. Colonel Briggs stood beside Monroe, who wore white gloves and a calm smile. "Begin phase 1, Monroe commanded. The room darkened as the amplifiers roared to life. Elias stood at his station, forced to monitor the readings. His hands shook as the energy climbed beyond safe levels. "Power at 60%. Stabilizing field. Wait. No, the resonance is spiking." Monroe raised his voice over the thunder. "Push through it." Elias slammed his fist on the table. "You'll collapse the field." Briggs turned, furious. "Hold your position, Finch." The hum grew louder, deeper, until it felt like the entire world was vibrating. The chronometric ring blazed white, and through it, shapes began to appear. Ghostly silhouettes of soldiers, smoke, horses charging through mist. The past was bleeding into the present. And then came the scream. One of the assistants, a young lieutenant, stumbled backwards, eyes wide with terror. His body shimmered like glass. Within seconds, he was gone, erased, leaving behind only a shadow burned into the floor. Clara shouted, "Shut it down!" The field collapsing. Elias grabbed the override lever and yanked it down. Sparks exploded. Glass shattered. The chronometer howled like a dying storm as the power cut off. The lights flickered. Once. Twice.
and went dark. When they returned, half the room was destroyed. Smoke, silence. And when Rose stood, trembling, staring at something in his hand that wasn't there before, the aftermath. They found the lieutenant's uniform, but not his body. In his place lay a scourged military tag dated June 5, 1863, 3 months in the future. No one spoke for hours. Finally, Monroe whispered, "We succeeded." Elias stepped forward. "You killed him. You ripped him out of his own timeline." Monroe turned, eyes gleaming with fanatic fire. "He isn't dead. He's proof. We reached across time itself." Elias lunged forward, grabbing Monroe by the collar. "You don't understand what you've done." Briggs pulled him back, voice cold. "You just changed history, Finch. That's what you built it for." But Elias shook his head, horror dawning. "Look around you, Colonel. This isn't history anymore. This is something else." And outside, in the streets of Washington, the clocks began to tick wrong. Some backwards, some forward. People awoke, remembering events that had never happened. Newspapers printed headlines from battles that had yet to occur. Reality itself had started to fracture. The vision. That night, unable to sleep, Elias returned to the lab alone. The remains of the chronometer glowed faintly in the dark. He placed his hand on the broken copper ring, and for an instant, he saw it again, that vision of the future battlefield. Only this time, it wasn't a glimpse. It was himself, standing